Have you ever wondered why building software is so hard? Why projects that seem totally straightforward can end up going off the rails, costing a fortune, or just becoming something completely different than what you first imagined? Well, today we're going to unpack the two big reasons why that happens. Seriously, it's a question that drives everyone nuts, from brand new programmers all the way up to tech CEOs. You'd think you could just, draw up a blueprint and build the thing. But software isn't like a bridge or a house. Its very nature creates these unique, tricky challenges that you just don't find anywhere else.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll set the stage with 3 core software puzzles. Then we're going to zoom right in on the 2 big ones. We'll look at why telling them apart is so incredibly important, and then wrap it all up with why this matters for literally any software project.
So to really get to the bottom of why software is so tricky, we have to start with these 3 foundational puzzles. Think of these as setting the stage for the 2 main ideas we're really going to dig into today. Okay, first up, software lives in this weird liminal state. It's not bound by the laws of physics like a skyscraper, but it's not pure fantasy either. It has its own rules and constraints that we often get wrong. Then you have our 2 main events for today, the circular specification problem and the observer effect. Now, they might sound kind of similar, but trust me, understanding the difference between them is the whole ballgame.
So let's talk about our first big idea, the circular specification problem. I think a great way to think about this one is as the internal challenge. This is the puzzle that the development team has to solve inside its own walls.
So what is it exactly?
Well, it's this simple but kind of mind-bending idea that you can't perfectly write down what a piece of software is supposed to do before it actually exists. It's like trying to write the perfect step-by-step recipe for some fancy, complex meal you've never ever cooked or even tasted before. You've got a general idea, sure, but all the important little details, those only show up when you're actually in the kitchen making it. This quote right here just nails it. We nearly always have to fully build the software in order to know precisely what we want it to be. This isn't because of bad planning or anything like that. It's a fundamental truth of software. For the team building it, the act of building is actually an act of discovery.
And here's the crucial point. This problem is caused by the internal team. It's the designers, the programmers, who are wrestling with this. They're the chefs in the kitchen, figuring out the recipe as they cook, because they just don't know yet what the final dish is really supposed to be.
But that's only half the story. See, once the team has actually built something, a second, equally powerful force kicks in. This is the software observer effect. And this one is an external challenge. It's what happens when the software finally leaves the kitchen and gets served to the guest. The observer effect is what happens when real people, your users, actually see and use the thing you built. And all of a sudden, their entire perspective can change. It's like, imagine you build an amazing new playground with a fantastic slide, but the minute kids start playing on it, they figure out it's actually way more fun to try and climb up it instead of sliding down. The act of using it radically changes their idea of what it's for. And that's the key difference right there. This effect is not caused by the internal team discovering things, it's caused by the users. They might spot an amazing new way to use the software that the creators never even dreamed of. Or they might realize it's missing something they now desperately need.
Okay, so we have these 2 big ideas, right? The team not knowing exactly what to build, and the users changing their minds once they see it. Now, they sound pretty connected, and they are. But realizing that there are 2 totally separate forces, that's the big aha moment of this whole explainer.
This is where it all just clicks into place. Just think about who's involved. The circular spec problem, that's internal. It's for the team. The observer effect, that's external. It's driven by users. And why do they happen? The first one is from not knowing what to build. The second is from seeing it and getting brand new ideas. And this also tells us when they happen. One is an early challenge of creation, the other is a later challenge of reaction.
So why does making this distinction matter so much? I mean, really, why care? Because mixing these 2 up, or even worse, just flat out ignoring one of them, is a classic mistake that can absolutely sink a project.
So here it is. This is the most common and dangerous mistake a team can make. They work incredibly hard. They solve that internal puzzle, the circular specification problem. They iterate,
They refine, they finally build the thing they discovered they needed to build, and then they completely ignore the feedback storm that comes from the observer effect when real people actually start using it. And when that happens, it leads to this predictable, really painful chain of events. At first, ignoring the user feedback feels like a win. Hey, we're moving faster. But then that feedback shows up anyway, just way later in the game, forcing these massive, expensive changes. And in the worst case, the project just fails. It's so far off from what people actually need that it has to be completely rewritten from scratch.
All right, let's pull all this together. Understanding why software is so hard isn't about finding someone to blame. It's about recognizing these two fundamental, powerful forces that are always at play.
So if there's one thing to lock in today, it's this. Software is shaped by two different challenges. You've got the internal challenge of creation. That's the circular spec problem. And you've got the external challenge of reaction, the observer effect. They are not the same thing. And building truly great software means you have to embrace both. That internal journey of discovery and the external conversation with your users.
And that really leaves us with one final, vital question to ask about any software we use or build. Is this thing the product of just a one-way vision from its creators, or is it the result of a real conversation? Is the team building what they think users want, or are they actually listening and adapting to what users discover they need once they get their hands on it?
You know, thinking about a problem in a new way is always the first step to solving it. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more explainers that make complex stuff like this super clear, do us a favor and subscribe to the Vibe Doc YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.